This class's topic is known as the Age of Reform. It looks at how the government in the late 19th century began to lose its dominant laissez-faire attitudes, and the government began to grow and enlarge with regulations and new agencies to address the problems of the Industrial Revolution. Now, the Industrial Revolution, we already know, didn't benefit everybody. The workers and the farmers were both hurt by the changing economy. The workers formed unions and the farmers formed alliances and ultimately the Grange, and indeed the farmers had some success with the Interstate Commerce Commission and the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, but none of these really solved their problems completely, and thus the farmers and workers are going to begin to turn to the federal government to address their problems. This is the beginning of a movement that ultimately will change the government forever. The first effort to form a national political party to address the problems of the Industrial Revolution was the so-called Greenback Party in the 1870s. You recall that the farmers wanted more money in the system. They wanted inflation because the prices for their crops were dropping, and this party sort of reflects that. It supported the expanded money supply and the inflationary policies the farmers wanted, and which gave the party its name, Greenbacks for Dollars, but also it supported health and safety regulations that the workers wanted. In 1878, with the help of the Grange and farmer alliances and the unions, the Greenback Party won 14 seats in Congress. But the economy was, pretty prosperous at this time, and prosperity sort of weakened the revolt, and the Greenback Party died out by the end of the 1880s. A more significant reform movement grew in its wake. In 1892, Farmer Alliance leaders led efforts to form another national reform movement of workers and farmers, the People's Party, they called it, which became known as the Populist Party. You may be familiar with the term populist. There's always been sort of a populist movement in American history. It's sort of a movement of the common people, the everyday Joes, and it's anti-elite. They see the wealthy and the powerful as invariably corrupt and not working in their own interest. While the People's Party of the 1890s was perhaps the best example of a populist movement, there have been populist elements throughout American history. In recent times, for example, the Tea Party movement in the Republican Party is strongly anti-elite and populist. Of course, no president wants to be seen as a man of the privileged elite, and all candidates kind of work to appear as a common man or woman. Meeting in Omaha, Nebraska in 1892, populist leaders drew up a platform of demands. The Omaha platform of the People's Party contained elements of both what the workers and the farmers wanted. The platform first called for higher wages, shorter working hours, and safety and health protections, which was an obvious demand of the workers. It then called for government regulation or ownership of the railroads and telegraphs, which was an obvious reaction to the monopolies and a demand for the farmers. Thirdly, it called for a graduated or progressive income tax, a demand of the workers. A progressive tax meant the more you earn, the higher percentage of your income you will pay in taxes. It should be noted that at the time, there was no federal income tax at all, either flat rate or progressive. Lastly, the Omaha platform called for the farmers' demand for more money in the economy. As mentioned in regard to the Industrial Revolution earlier, inflationary policies helped the farmers get more for their crops, which were in a deflationary cycle due to the increased production of the Industrial Revolution. As a way to increase inflation, the populists supported a money based on not simply gold, as it was, but on both gold and silver, a bimetallic monetary policy. There was much more silver available, and the populists supported a 16-to-1 silver to gold ratio and the printing of a paper dollar. In this cartoon, you can see the conservative criticism of the populist bimetallic monetary demands. The bicycle is riding on wheels of both gold and silver, and it is wobbly. It's also interesting to note that many in the Populist Party sought to build an interracial movement with African Americans. African Americans were poor, like themselves, and more members would strengthen the People's Party power, of course. When a black populist leader pursued by a lynch mob took refuge in his house during the 1892 campaign, the agrarian leader Tom Watson summoned 2,000 white populists to defend him. Nevertheless, at the same time, many populists in the South still clung to their racism and resisted Watson's efforts to integrate the People's Party or Populist Movement. In their Omaha convention, the People's Party nominated in 1892 former Civil War general and former Greenback Party leader James B. Weaver of Iowa. Courting the farming South, they chose as their vice presidential candidate a man from Virginia, a man who lost a leg fighting for the Confederacy. Weaver and the Populists warned that if the laissez policies of the government continued, disaster would loom. The nation, the party claimed, was on, quote, the verge of moral, political, and material ruin. Government needed to be in the hands of the, quote, plain people. Events seemed to back up the populist worry. The horrible homestead strike, which had been discussed earlier in the Industrial Revolution, was, of course, in 1892. Given these sentiments, the Populist Party did well in the 1892 election relatively. James Weaver got just over a million votes, about 8.5% of the total, and the Populists elected 5 senators, 10 congressmen, and 3 governors. The new party carried Kansas and registered some appeal in the West and in places like Georgia, Alabama, and Texas, where the Farmer Alliance movement had taken deep root. It didn't do that great in New England or the urban East, which was kind of a disappointment given the number of factory workers up there. Nevertheless, the Populists, the People's Party, were optimistic looking towards the future. This concludes the first section on the Populist Movement or the People's Party.